James, this deep dive today, incredible, because we spend so much time in sort of these big picture conversations, dissecting people's Catholicism and dissecting the sort of surge of traditional Catholicism in recent years. But you know what? As someone who was raised Missouri Synod Lutheran, we never talk about Lutheranism. And yet today, James, you have prepared. You went deep on the different strains of Lutheranism in order to inform people about Tim Walz's sort of philosophical religious background. Just please share your research.
Well, they don't call us Undercurrents for nothing, and I really wanted to explore this completely under-discussed dimension to Kamala Harris's vice presidential announcement, Tim Walz. He is the Minnesota governor, but as you mentioned, he is a Lutheran, which is a denomination of Christianity and Protestantism. And you're right, we had this rise of the whole trad-cath movement. But what's interesting about Lutheranism is exactly A, where they're concentrated, and B, the level of influence that they still have. So, Tim Walz is Lutheran. He represents more than 20% of the Minnesotan population there, and it's obviously one of the most Lutheran states in the country. But his strain
Germans,
of Lutheranism,
and that's
evangelical...
Yeah, I was going to say, it was the heaviest pockets of Lutheranism in the United States are places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, where a lot of Germans migrated to in the 19th century. And I'm from Wisconsin. We're very heavily Lutheran state. But James, as you're about to tell us, these different variations of Lutheranism are incredibly important. Like, you have basically nothing in common with an ELCA member.
Right, Walz is a church-going man. He says faith is important to him, but he is a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which is very different from your denomination. You can see on the Trump vote share in 2020, in the general election, only 52% of his strain of Lutherans actually supported the president, whereas compared to other evangelical Christians, much more Trumpy, much more conservative. So why does all this matter? Even though religious attendance is down across the country and those who identify as Christian is dropping, the Christian vote is still very important. What is the other state that has a big Lutheran contingency? It's Pennsylvania. They're all concentrated in the most competitive regions in that state. So Charles McKelvey, he is a Real Clear Politics Pennsylvania editor, and he told me that these German Lutherans are actually driving the blue push in growing suburban regions in Pennsylvania. So their influence is rising, and it could just be enough to tip the balance in Kamala Harris's favor should that day come.
Immediately, people in conservative Christian circles started circulating videos from Tim Walz's church, and it has the word evangelical, obviously ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. Let's say Missouri Synod, Wisconsin Synod Lutherans really don't consider them to be Lutheran at all. It's in the name, but they have strayed into mainline Protestant territory, like competitive in terms of how kind of culturally progressive they can get with some of those other denominations, Episcopalians, like that, in terms of sex and gender, race, truth, the sort of absolute nature of truth, the nature of the Trinity, but gender in particular. If you look at some of the videos from churches like Tim Walz's, it's just basically like you're going to church in, I don't know, let's say, I was going to make fun of you, James. I don't want to dox you, but I was going to say in your neighborhood, in a very deep blue pocket, even if you're in Minnesota. And I just can't imagine these churches are doing very well. I'd be curious to see numbers on that in terms of their attendance.
It really wasn't helped when lockdown or the shutdowns occurred across America. And Tim Walz gave his blessing to the closure of the churches. And that actually angered a lot of the Lutheran denominations, the more conservative ones in Minnesota, who still have not forgiven him for doing that. They thought, why are shopping malls open, but the church doors are closed? So it does speak to the lingering unhappiness that a lot of these people feel towards their current governor.
Yeah, and it speaks to how denominations in different parts of the Midwest that used to be share so many different cultural touchstones and used to culturally be very familiar to each other, are, to borrow the Charles Murray phrase, coming apart. And that's happening not just, in your neighborhood and coastal deep blue pockets. It's happening absolutely everywhere. And Lutheranism in the United States is no exception to it. But yeah, it's hard for Tim Walz to make the case that his ELCA church gives him Lutheran credibility, unless it's the wrong kind of Lutheran credibility with, I don't know, most of like Midwestern rural voters, if that's what Kamala Harris thinks that he's going to help with. So anyway, James, that's sort of a bitter and salty take, but I just don't think some of these less traditional churches, a lot of the growth you're seeing is in the more traditional churches. And since we're having the conversation, I'll just put the fine point on that. Young people who are looking for something that gives them a sense of purpose are not super inclined to find it in places where, even churches that, like my own, actually, because I go to even an evangelical church now. People are wearing jeans and there's rock music. It's harder for people to feel tethered to that sense of purpose and tradition and longevity in an almost Burkean sense when, you're just getting this laissez-faire, flippant, truth is relative, there are 52 genders or whatever. It's not that appealing to people who are looking for purpose and meaning, whether it's left or right, James. So thanks for braving the choppy waters of American Lutheranism and picking up on the undercurrent. Well, if you enjoyed this clip, please make sure to subscribe to the Undercurrents YouTube channel. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like, give us a comment. It helps so much. And for premium access, make sure to subscribe at undercurrents.tv. Thanks so much.